Awesome. So today, we're going to hear from these publishers and brands on how they create content to reach and engage with diverse audiences. So how do you tell stories no one is sharing? How do you report on those left out of the media? So first, I would like to go down the panel so they have time to introduce themselves. And I want each of you to talk through your publisher or brand's mission and what sets you apart in how you reach your audience. So yeah, Colin.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. All right, there we go. So hi, I'm Colin Jones. I'm the Director of Audience Development for Vice News specifically. I work for the HBO shows and also our .com, and our mission is to be open and honest and tell stories that no one really is digging into in a full way. So if something's trending in the news necessarily, we're not just automatically going to write it up. We're going to see if we can take a different angle. We're going to see if we can take a different track on it. And we're going to see if we can really humanize the story and break through in a different way. And that's overall the goal of the shows and the sites that I work on.
Great. Maya.
I'm Maya. I am... Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm the former editor-in-chief of Little Things, and now I'm the editor-in-chief and VP of content at RockU. RockU acquired Little Things after it shut down. So Little Things is one of the properties that I oversee now, and we're about to bring on a bunch of other brands. So the mission statement at Little Things was to post feel-good, inspiring content. And as most of you know, we did that primarily through Facebook. And RockU's mission is to amplify the voice of multicultural millennials.
Great. Polly.
Hi, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Unbound. We're a sexual health and wellness company specifically focused on women and non-binary and femme-identifying individuals. We make and sell vibrators, lubricants, and accessories directly to customers. Our mission is really to make sex both extraordinary and ordinary. As we've seen sex ed in this country basically become non-existent, we really focus on how do you make content that is both fact-driven and based in science, but also engaging and entertaining and witty. And I think we really focus on telling the narrative from a female and femme and non-binary perspective.
Great, thanks. And Andy.
Hey, I'm Andy Sullivan with Al Jazeera, and working for a Muslim organization. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say vibrator, but so since its founding in 1996, Al Jazeera has really tried to give voice to the voiceless, and that's been our mission, really to seek out the stories and people and areas that are being underserved by major news organizations. And with the left and the right constantly debating each other, there's a lot that's getting left out, and that's where we live. So we're really trying to shine a light on the things that are getting missed, and we've modified our distribution, our editorial, and our monetization strategy to serve that goal.
Great, thank you. So I would like to ask each of you, whether you founded your company or you joined later in the process after it was established, if there was a story that kind of made you realize that there was an audience that wasn't being reached, and what that story was and what made you want to start targeting them with your content. And I'd love to start with Maya, especially around Little Things.
Sure. So I was there for the founding of Little Things. I published a blog that was 7 things in your home that might kill your cat. I was a social media manager. It crashed the e-commerce site. It was like basically Little Things was founded as a blog on an e-commerce site. So it crashed the entire e-commerce site. The founder of the e-commerce site came out of his office. I apologized. He asked me if I could do that every day. So the next day I published 7 things in your home that could kill your dog. And that's how I wound up in media. So that was about 5 years ago now. But I think what really changed my perception, so I had the mandate, after I got through killing every pet in your home, what we decided to differentiate ourselves by creating only feel-good, inspiring content geared towards women. Because, from the top down, that's what women wanted to see. That's how we were going to differentiate ourselves. We weren't going to touch politics. That's all we were going to do. And I think the thing that really changed my perspective is I kind of went rogue at one point when the story of Amran was in the news, the little boy who was bleeding in the back of an ambulance in a bombing. And we had licensing partnerships at that point, and I think it might have been even a CNN video. I can't really remember what the video was, but I found a video of a newscaster breaking down when she sees the pictures of this little boy covered in blood. And I just told my top trending writer, I was like, just write it up. Like, it's going to go insane for us. We're going to get a ton of traffic on it. And I'll defend it later when I get spoken to about how this wasn't feel good and inspiring. And as I predicted, it did go insanely viral. And that caused us to expand our definition at little things to meaningful. We never really touched on politics. We never put a voice to really anything meaningful. We would republish stories when we thought we could drive traffic from it, but we never aligned ourselves with a cause. So what's exciting for me under new leadership at Rock U is I'm empowered to do that and to speak to our audience and really speak to the causes that they believe in now. So I've only been with Rock U and reviving little things for about 2 months, but something that I'm focused on is finding the causes that are important to the women and the men in our audience, because we had 25% of our audience was men. We never did anything to address that as well. So I'm kind of recalibrating my strategy, so I'm kind of making it up as I go along right now.
Great. Polly, the same question for you. Was there something that, your co-founder that inspired you, a specific story?
Yeah, my co-founder is actually here today. Her name is Sarah Jane, and we met in 2014, and I think we both had our own experiences of being professional women who were smart and went to school and owning and shopping for a vibrator, and that it wasn't an ideal shopping experience. For me personally, I was 21. I'd been diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and the first part of my treatment plan was radiation. And as a result of radiation, my doctors kind of sat me down and said, you'll never have children, but they didn't tell me kind of what that actually meant. And so I started having hot flashes and all these symptoms, and I did what all millennials do, which is to get on Google and try to figure it out myself. And that was how I found out I was going through menopause. And I think it was this really poignant moment when I realized that female sexuality wasn't seen as something that was important to a quality of life. It was very much seen in the lens of you're either a mother and your fertility, or hypersexualized through like pornography, and not through the lens of I'm a woman and there should be a place in between. And so I think when I got brave enough to share that story with both people around me, investors, other female founders, I realized that by being vulnerable, I was able to really build brand credibility. And it was really difficult, but ultimately it allowed our brand to really position itself as brave, which I think in a world where everybody's trying to be edgy and cool and bold and be ahead of the next thing, you have to really kind of turn inward and be like, what makes our brand special? And ultimately it has to be the people at the company. So we're a smaller startup, but everybody that works at our company was hired based on the values that they believe that women should be telling their own narratives when it comes to just sexual health in general.
Great. And Andy, for you, what pulled you into Al Jazeera initially and the audience that it reaches?
I think it's really just the opportunity to work for an organization that is kind of trying to tell a story without being beholden to an advertiser. We're not going after clicks. We're not looking to please Coke or Pepsi or whoever it might be. Although if you guys are here, well, we can talk later. We're really trying to tell the story and trying to tell it in a way that's nonpartisan and non-biased and with a global point of view. And that really appealed to me as I was coming in. Especially, I've been at Al Jazeera for a year now. We're in this time of hyper-partisanship, and everyone's got an opinion on everything, and that really drives the direction of the news. We're trying to tell the story really from a global perspective and an unbiased opinion.
Yeah, and same for you, Colin.
So I've been with Vice News since November, and a few weeks after I joined, this story was released. Our climate team went to Alaska and met with an indigenous community up there that is having their town basically destroyed by climate change. It's sinking into the sea, and the government's paying for them to move, but they don't really want to move. And it kind of, in my mind, was like the definition of what we do really well at Vice News on these programs. We bring you to places that you normally wouldn't go, and the news wouldn't normally find you there. And with this community, I mean, it was heartbreaking, and it was one of the most powerful stories I've watched. And naturally, some people in the news would be like, okay, this maybe would be a dry report, but it blew up for us, and actually it led, I believe, to more funding for the community. And so making that difference and bringing these voices and these stories out there is really, really important to me, and it's really, really important to the organization in general.
And I'm glad you told a story like that. I am curious, like, how do we talk about impact so much in storytelling and journalism or brands? How do you use all the KPIs, all the metrics to gauge what success looks like, especially because you are targeting audiences? If you want to start.
So my definition of success is if it makes an impact within that community itself. I mean, something can blow up. It gets 10,000 shares, it gets 20,000 shares, it gets 1 million views. But if it's not necessarily impacting people's beliefs or thoughts or people within that community or being shared actually within that community itself, then I'm not necessarily satisfied with that. I want to reach out to people, and I want to reach out to these communities with our, not just Facebook posts, but like Twitter and with, everything that we're able to share and get those into the hands of the people that matter and the people that make decisions.
Do you have any ways, and I'd love to hear from everybody else too, that you measure it, or is it a pretty manual process for you then?
So it's a pretty manual process for us where I do a lot of tracking based on who's sharing it. I do a lot of one-to-one reach out within activist communities and within interest communities, and I monitor and track the sharing of our posts, and then I report up and make sure to follow up and to build up these relationships with a lot of these people I'm sharing with, and then when I have a story of interest, I'm able to reach out to them again. It might be tangential, but then we're able to make a further impact.
Maya, how about for you? Do you guys have any ways that you like to measure impact or talk about it?
So a lot of the original content we create is in the form of video series. And we launch those video series, generally speaking, on show pages within Watch. And you can see really quickly the shows that are resonating with the audience based on the people that actually like the show page and continue to come back. We also formed communities around key hosts. And we had one community that they named themselves. So we have a show that we run every day. It used to be at 10 a.m. It's relaunching next week at 11 a.m. on Facebook Watch. And that show is called Refresh. And the audience named themselves Sugar Cubes, which is like little something sweet, which is what the show is. It's something like positive to start off your day. It used to be an hour long. Now it's going to be 22 minutes because we're doing everything like a little bit more streamlined in version 2.0. But the Sugar Cubes named themselves, and they formed a very active community where they are actually talking to themselves. They message the hosts directly to their personal pages, which the hosts are cool with. So I think that, there's no real metric for that kind of audience alignment. But some of the comments that people have shared with us about how it's changed their lives, those have been the real measure of success and impact for me.
And Polly, same for you and your community.
Yeah, I mean, we're a business and a brand, so ultimately it's all about revenue. And what does the top line look like in terms of just measuring, are we growing, are we resonating? But then I think it's delving deeper beneath revenue to look at, like, we're also a team of Midwesterners, so we care very deeply about our customer, and we are obsessed with customer data and feedback, and that can be something as high level as sending out surveys every single month to gauge NPS, to just picking up the phone and talking to someone for 30 minutes about their experience, about what it was like, about their brand, about how they found us, is the content stuff that they're reading and engaging with. And I think for us, it's being willing to just go so much further than people would ever expect a brand to do. Another good example is recently we let our Instagram audience name what our product was going to be, which is a little terrifying to kind of, open up to an audience. But we got, thousands and thousands of people submitting ideas. And now the person who actually won gets their handle on our packaging. So I think it's a matter of thinking about, how do I treat this community like it is a living, breathing thing, very similarly, in the sense that we would be nothing without them. And so we should give them opportunities to feel like they really are a part of something, especially when it feels scary, because I think then you just earn that trust and that credibility so much more.
Yeah. And then Andy, as you think about, business development and growth, does impact matter? Is it too vague to measure it?
Well, it's definitely vague, but I guess it depends on the type of content that we have out there. On the hard news side, straight news side, it's really the standard metrics. It's the views, it's the shares, the reach. But when you have opinion pieces and editorial pieces, it's a lot about the conversation that the content's creating, similar to what Maya was talking about, and how that conversation gets deep and how we can interact with our users within that conversation. I think it brings up kind of the dark side of social media and digital in general, is just also the trolling that happens within those conversations, and it becomes a little bit difficult to monitor that. So these are things that we're looking at, we're actively discussing with the platforms that we work with on how to solve that, because we do think that conversation is extremely valuable.
And speaking of social media, are there platforms you have specifically found helpful in, reaching your audience? What have been some challenges and success with social media? Andy, if you want to just pick up on that.
Sure. We try to be on every platform that we possibly can. Certain content and certain brands that we have index better on Facebook than they do on Twitter. Our Al Jazeera English and our Al Jazeera Arabic brands do much better on Twitter than our AJ Plus brand, which is a millennial-focused social-only brand, which does really well on Facebook. So it kind of depends on the content. We haven't really gotten that deep into Snapchat yet, but do see other news organizations having great success there, so that's something that we're looking into. Apple News is one that's really kind of coming up out of nowhere for us, and becoming a great distribution point for us. But we really have to be very broad in the way that we're distributing our content, because we want to make sure that we're getting our content to the right user at the right place at the right time in the way that they want to view it, and that means that we have to be everywhere.
How about for you, Polly, in starting a business on social media? Does it change maybe how you originally thought you would interact with customers?
Yeah, our particular category, I knew it was going to be tough. When my mom reacted with you want to do what with your life? I was like, all right, buckle up, we're doing it. So I think I knew it was going to be difficult. I don't think I anticipated how difficult it would be on social media. So specifically, Facebook and Instagram do not allow any female-oriented sexual health and wellness companies to advertise at all. Viagra, sure. Erectile dysfunction drugs, sure. Trojan, very hyper sexually explicit images, sure. But when it comes to anything from a sex therapist to, we wrote a beautiful piece about what does great sex ed look like in the United States. We've been on CNN and on the cover of the New York Times, and it's just been really frustrating that we can't even boost these very factor of incredible resources. And I think it goes to show that Facebook still has a very long way to go in terms of how do we amplify the voices that are telling a great narrative, and how do we ensure that we're not letting those that aren't use our platform. But we actually take kind of the opposite approach because we're much smaller. So we very much exclusively focus on Instagram, where we have a very specific type of kind of low-brow humor that caters to a female millennial consumer, coupled with email marketing and newsletters through that, because the type of information we're disseminating is very private in nature. And so naturally, people aren't going to want to share it all over Facebook where they're friends with their grandma and their second cousin who lives in Arkansas. So we found that distributing content through email does incredibly well, and people really like digesting it through that format.
And then Maya, for you, you've seen so many ups and downs with platforms. Can you explain your experience with it and kind of where you are now and the role social media plays in your work?
Yeah, 2.5 months ago, I found out at 4:30 that my entire company was collapsing. And then an email was sent out to everybody at 5. So yeah, it plays a huge role. It's scary. So I think I would be foolish and careless and reckless to ever rely on one platform in the way that we did ever again. I think in defense of what the strategy was, Little Things was trying to be very heavy on Facebook and then made a very big play for OTT, which involved us spending about like $500,000 per month on creating programming for OTT. And it didn't pan out the way that we expected it to. So now I think a lot about diversification and also experimentation. I think it's really, really easy as a publisher to see where you are making money right at the present moment and to focus on that and to devote all of your resources to that. But I think the responsibility of someone in my role who's not really being creative on a day-to-day basis anymore is to force the conversation into what platform should we be experimenting on next to distribute our content, because this is not going to last forever. And I think like Facebook gets a lot of flack right now, but in terms of influencers, I am a millennial, so I watch a lot of YouTubers. They have seen their like revenue go up and down, like a lot of these individual influencers. So there's no platform that you can become completely dependent on. It's easier to say this on a stage than to actually do it. So it's something that I'm still working on and developing ways to spread content through Pinterest, through email marketing, which is, I think, huge. And then, we think of Instagram, I think, as part of Facebook, and I think it's important to do that. But there's so many different ways that you can use Instagram to drive brand alignment. And then I think like the most significant thing is to create unique content that people are going to come back for, so on any platform, and look for. And I think that still comes in the form of video. So I'm always thinking about how can I create video for as little money as possible, and how can I drive personalities through the video that really speak to my audience and beliefs that they align with.
And then Colin, for you, Vice is a huge brand, like pretty established. What role does social play now, especially after algorithm changes, for you?
So specifically for news, social plays a huge part, and we take a experimental kind of approach to it. We're on almost every platform, but we're willing to shift and change based upon how our audience acts day to day. We do a lot of A/B testing. We do a lot of like paid testing as well. But the thing is that if we were to discount social at all, and this is not just with the Facebook algorithm, which every company saw downturns with that. It's not just about Facebook. It's about we love experimenting on YouTube. We love experimenting on Twitter, and so social plays a massive, massive, massive part of our outreach. There was often this belief, kind of, in back in the day, where it's like you have your website and social's over here. Now it's everywhere. We are on every single platform, and everywhere we reach is Vice News, specifically. And so that's how I count it. I mean, we get X amount of million views on each platform, and so to discount social would be, I think, foolish in my mind. So we're still in on it.
And then I have a question for you and Polly, especially. Your publications or your brands can deal with sometimes taboo topics. Polly, you touched on this already. Do you have faced challenges with that on social? Or does it make it easier to maybe target your audience?
I don't know. Who wants to? Do you want?
Yeah.
Yeah. So specifically in news, we don't deal with taboo in a certain way of covering necessarily the crazy stuff. But you could say taboo would be war in a way, because social platforms do not like showing the open and honest way that our reporters bring you to a battlefield, and to really show you the truth and how brutal it is, and how it's impacting real people's lives. For example, we had this report from Mosul, and we made sure to put a graphic warning on it. We made sure to put a tagging warning on it. So we're always thinking, and this comes around monetization as well, too. A lot of companies, it's hard to monetize around certain things. We're thinking of that, yes, but we're also thinking about, is this going to be downplayed within the platforms? Is this going to actually reach people? Because, sometimes people don't want to share things of a graphic nature. But that does not mean we're going to stop reporting on them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does it change your strategy at all? Has it changed your coverage to balance it out at all even?
No. No, because the thing is, it's important to cover these things. This is the way our world works, and this is the way you can't ignore these. And if you do ignore them, then the problems are only going to get worse.
Polly, how about for you? You touched upon it a little bit, that you face challenges on Facebook, for example, with your product. And you recently, your own company was making headlines around this idea of what is too so-called taboo. Can you talk about that a bit? Like, how do you talk to your community when these issues kind of rise up to the public?
Yeah, I think we've done a really good job of identifying what our values are and then never wavering from them. And we recently submitted artwork to everyone's favorite villain, the MTA, which I think our director of content, my co-founder Sarah Jane, was the mastermind behind all of this. And I think it's hard to pound on the table when you're a brand because people don't really care. I think when you are lifting up the voices of others to pound on the table for you, it's a very different situation. And so Sarah Jane, being the genius that she is, realized, why don't we work with artists to commission artwork so that they can tell the narrative of what female sexuality looks like, and then we'll submit that to the MTA, because then it's not product driven, it's not us being self-promotional. It's us lifting up the voices of these artists and amplifying their work. And in turn, we are doubling down on the values to our community, who say, wow, that's really awesome that Unbound pay all that money to put an artist on the subway as opposed to their own products. And then the MTA rejected it. And I think, and it just happened to be kind of the perfect storm of events that they rejected it in the same week that erectile dysfunction drug took over all of Grand Central. And so I think it was a very poignant example of a feeling that all of our customers and community feels every day, but often struggles to put their finger on, which is, the microaggressions of being a woman. And here was a very blatant example of that. And so I think when you see those examples as a brand, you have to approach it very carefully, because it's very easy to miss, and then you lose all trust of your community and your customers. But we did a really good job of taking that opportunity and saying, here's a very poignant example of what we've been, preaching for years, which is that women aren't given the same opportunities when it comes to defining their own sexual experience as men are. And so it was definitely scary, because you kind of turn it over to the community and then let them tell the story for you. But when you've been really careful about defining your values, you attract the people that are going to do right by you. So again, I think it's about just being brave enough to make those bold decisions and letting go of the reins a little bit and saying let the community speak for us. It'll be interesting to see how that scales. I think it's easy to do today because we're much more, we're a much smaller community than a lot of the people up here on the stage.
Where were you mostly hearing from your customers when all of this was happening?
It was, mostly Instagram and Twitter. But I had people that were finding my number and texting me and and I think the thing that was really amazing was how many female business owners just came out of the woodwork and were I've got a storefront, let's put this art up on a wall. And I think you have to capitalize on those opportunities to continue the narrative so that people feel like it's not just a PR stunt, but it was mostly on social media, really. And I think Instagram is where, and again, Instagram for a while, we had a hashtag WTF MTA, and Instagram blocked it for a while. And then that even just dumps gasoline on the fire, right? So then you have individuals who are oh, the system's really trying to keep us down. And so I think sometimes you have to use those controversies to your advantage and be so public about it. So when they blocked it, we immediately screenshotted it and then showed people. And then I think it adds more credibility to the fact that you are fighting an uphill battle. But I think when brands are pretending there's an uphill battle and there isn't, people see through that immediately. Mm-hmm. So I think there has to be an actual controversy there that you're fighting against.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. And for Andy, I wanted to talk a little bit about growth is in your title, but in media especially, we think a lot about growth means scale, right? So more content, get it out there. But with you guys having a pretty specific defined audience, does loyalty and scale, do you ever find tension there? And how do you navigate maybe abandoning an audience for the sake of growth?
I don't know if we would ever abandon an audience. Mm-hmm. We would probably try to create content that's going to create more engagement around it. which I think is becoming the new metric in social. It's not necessarily about becoming viral and getting out to as many eyeballs as you possibly can. It's about engaging people, having them share it, having them comment on things, having them come back and view things multiple times. So we're really looking at those repeat users. We're looking at the users that are converting. They're coming from social. They're coming in from search. They're using our apps. They're using our websites, because that's where we can really take them and we can engage them and we can grow that as an audience. And so we're really trying to use the reach and the virility of some of the pieces of content to convert users into real loyal users.
And then Maya, similar question for you. Talked about diversifying a lot more now. What becomes more important as you were looking to grow? Is it platforms? Is it different types of content? What are you weighing in that struggle right now?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, the different types of content and content that aligns with causes is something that I'm really thinking about that's important to me, and content that reaches communities that are not often spoken to. So a series that we're working on that will launch in September is called Her Recovery, and it's about women in recovery from addiction. And we are going to launch this video series on Facebook with the show page and speak to that community. And it's incredibly important to me to do this because there's not a lot of hopeful content, I think, that speaks to women who are addicts. I feel like you see a lot of like intervention type of content, but not a lot of content about women in recovery specifically, and it's a huge, robust community. And from a metrics standpoint, stories of transformation and stories where the underdog wins have always done well for Little Things, so that's something that we are launching specifically for Little Things. We are also working on bringing more domains under the RockU umbrella and speaking to the audiences that live on each of those domains, which is something that I'm focused on, building out video content that speaks to them as well.
Great. And I want to leave some time for questions, so I want to end with a kind of optimistic note. So what is something, you guys are building your audiences. Is there something you're really optimistic about in a way to kind of let your content break through more? Is there something you're really looking forward to in this year? And I'll start with you, Colin.
I'm optimistic that news can work on social. I mean, the thing is that it's been kind of a tough year for a lot of news publishers. But just seeing how far our stories go and seeing how far our impact is with our stories really makes me hopeful for the coming year. It really does.
How about you, Maya?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about creating content for these niche audiences. And, I think viral has gone out of vogue. And even for direct advertisers, when Little Things was doing 60 million ComScore uniques, we weren't driving big direct ad sales revenue. And I think people are really getting hip to brands and publishers that can speak to the exact audience that they want to speak to, and it doesn't need to be 60 million of those people, but they want to reach certain groups of people. And there's so many options out there now. If you can do a few things really well, it's more powerful than these broad strokes where it's like, I made a puppy rolling down the hill get 10 million Facebook views. People are like, I don't care. So the fact that people are more into quality now rather than quantity and just crazy viral volume, I think is hopeful.
I like viral is going out of vogue. Yeah. Polly, how about for you?
I think the silver lining to Donald Trump getting elected was that a lot of people just woke the fuck up and were like, what is happening? And I think for us, the optimism is that women and non-binary and femme-identifying individuals are pissed off. And I think they're listening to brands and voices that speak to them. And I totally agree that it's all about quality over quantity. And I think that brands have this massive opportunity where they have a platform and they have a voice. And if they use it in a way that matters, you're going to see really loyal customers and community members stick with you. And so I think that's the silver lining for sure.
And Andy?
To be kind of specific, we're very optimistic about the audio space. We're investing heavily into smart speakers. We spun up a podcast studio. We just find it's a great medium right now for telling stories and for engaging users and going deep with loyal users. So we're very optimistic about that and hope that that's something in 2018, 2019 becomes a lot bigger. But we're making a bet on it.
That's great. All right, and then I want to open it up to any questions in the audience. Do we have a mic or anything that can go around?
There's one on this side.
Okay. Did you have one? Yeah.
This relates to Paul's comments about Facebook earlier, and my particular, since the whole thing is kind of written and done by Facebook, did you ever have second thoughts about abandoning Facebook and doing all the other stuff that's going on? And then my question for all of you, have you been able to monetize video games given all the changes?
Yeah, I mean, so when Facebook shut down, we were still doing 39 million ComScore uniques through just Facebook publishing. So we were on this hamster wheel, and we had a huge, robust company, and we're spending a lot of money on things that we probably shouldn't have been spending money on. So it wasn't just really Facebook. Like, we did see a tremendous decrease in our organic traffic, but I think to the degree that it was exaggerated in the press, I never said, like, oh, we shouldn't run anything on Facebook. I mean, for days after the shutdown, I still had traffic on the site, and we weren't posting anything, so we were still driving traffic. I think building your full strategy on Facebook is something that I would give a second thought to. Yeah, and just you have to diversify, but I do think that the idea that Facebook completely shut little things down has been something that was kind of presented to the press that wasn't honestly the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So I think that there were changes that we could have made to certain departments that would have allowed us to stay open. And since we've brought little things back, we are seeing like our numbers get right up to that point again. We're just doing so with a much smaller staff and a much more streamlined plan of how we're reaching that audience.
I think that you asked about monetization.
Yeah, just, saying better.
I mean, basically building your monetization strategy around one platform itself, I wouldn't necessarily do that in the future, but right now our goal in terms of monetization is looking for a number of diverse sources, like basically not just Facebook ads, not just YouTube ads, not just mid-roll. It's got to be smart, strategic, and across the board, and basically look for any different outlet. I mean, right now we're looking for third-party distribution, and then also, doing creative partnerships and doing all these sorts of innovative things, because, news is a business. It has to have money to survive, but, we can't lump everything within one thing, because when the rug gets pulled out, then it really can cause, a big freak out not just within organizations, but within the industry.
Would you ever experiment without monetization being a part of the platform going forward?
Yes. You mean with Facebook in particular, or any platform?
Any platform, yeah.
So I mentioned before that we take a really experimental track. And we often are experimenting without monetization. Monetization is a overall end goal in terms of a lot of stuff, as well as impact. But we're always down to take risks. We're always down to see if our content can resonate, not just on different platforms, but within those platforms in experimental different ways. How does it work on Instagram stories? How's it going to work on my story on Snapchat? How's it going to work on live? How's it going to work on X, Y, and Z? Because if you're not trying those things, you're kind of letting down audiences that are already there.
And we don't monetize a lot of our content. As a company that's not always looking at the bottom line, we haven't been first into the monetization game. But what we've discovered on a lot of the platforms is if you're not making them money, they're not going to pay a lot of attention to you. So it's almost kind of a requirement to be monetizing and to be out there and making money for Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or whoever it might be, or you're not going to get the opportunities for the new product launches, for the marketing events, things like that. They won't tell you that, but that feels to be the way that it is.
Any other questions? Yeah.
My name is Matt Morales, and I'm a venture capitalist, and I'm in the business of deploying financial capital to push causes and an agenda. And I'm curious if you guys have thought about, specifically Colin and Maya, you guys have talked so passionately about the impact that the attention that the media you create has brung. If you've ever considered taking that next step and building a direct financial relationship with your audience, and in some essence becoming a crowdfunding platform, not just funneling attention, but actual dollars to some of these things that you're obviously so passionate about and you care so much about the actual impact.
Yeah, so Little Things partnered with GoFundMe. It was a few years ago now. And the reason why we built this partnership is we ran a piece of content about this single dad who was homeless. And we were working with this influencer, and he wanted us to promote it for him, and we were working on a larger partnership, so we did. And the piece went extremely viral, and the audience built this single father a GoFundMe page. Someone linked it in the post, and they raised $50,000 for him. And so after that, GoFundMe reached out to Little Things, and we formed a partnership to do crowdfunding.
Were you guys able to take a piece of the transaction?
No, we actually worked it out. I don't think it matters anymore, but we did co-production with them. So they paid for, we priced out the production, Little Things did, and then they paid for half of it, and then we assumed the other half of the cost. We never really thought about building crowdfunding at the time, but towards the end of Little Things 1.0, I was talking to Vimeo about building subscriber content, like premium content for the audience, similar to what podcasters do. But when I looked at how much I could reasonably charge the audience, because I don't think that I can charge an audience more than Netflix per month, right? Like for what I'm going to deliver them, because Netflix has everything. So when I could look at what I would reasonably charge the audience versus how many subscribers I estimated, it didn't make sense to create that volume of premium content. It's still something I occasionally anxiously think about, in the shower, it's like, where could I get more premium subscribers or crowdfunders? But I don't know. I also feel honestly really weird taking saying I'm crowdfunding and taking a piece of it. I get that that's the way businesses work, but I don't know.
So for Vice News in particular, we don't do advocacy. We do more of impact. So working directly with these communities on necessarily raising money for them would not be something that our organization would do, but audience-funded journalism is actually I find very fascinating. I find very, with the WNYC, subscription, donation model, and with other, I know there's, I think, what is it? ProPublica has a fundraising tool as well, and those I find fascinating. It's not something we've necessarily explored, but it's something that, could be investigated.
Don't you feel like the line is pretty blurry there? Because you yourself just said, you spoke with so much pride and heart about how the piece that you guys did helped this town in Alaska raise money. That sounds like advocacy to me, not directly in that same way, but it just seems like they're so close together that it's maybe a little bit of a false distinction, or the lines are blurred at the very least.
Maybe, but what I would say is advocacy takes it to a point of being fully invested and actually going out there and doing almost activism work yourself as an organization. We at Vice News, the mission is often to go to places and tell the story of underserved people, underrepresented people, and then bring it to a larger audience. That's our mission. Necessarily going out there and raising money for people and also, moving legislation forward. That's not something that specifically is in the mission at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, we're at time, but thank you, and I think our panel will probably stick around for other questions too.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody on here for that great conversation, and I think we're inviting